Welcome to Tracy's Terrors. If you love horror and appreciate smart animal commentary, then you are in the right place. Today, Strigoi, VamPullet, and I will be discussing Annie Neugebauer's, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, we're going to be discussing her debut novella, The Extra. Before we begin though, please subscribe to the channel and visit the website, which is tracysterrors.com. We're going to mix it up a little today and begin with a summary. The Extra is told from the perspective of Matt, an experienced nature guide who leads a group of university students on a camping trip in Arkansas. After a mysterious electrical event, he discovers that his party has grown from 10 to 11 people, an inexplicable change since there's no stranger among them. He's convinced that the extra participant is actually an extraterrestrial and sets out to identify this alien, determined to separate it from the rest and leave it behind. Like The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the Extra introduces aliens in order to probe human psychology under pressure, in particular our instinct to categorize and exclude perceived threats. What makes this book stand out is the way it interrogates the ethics of this impulse, while at the same time conscripting us, the reader, through its short form, its urgent plot, and its use of the present tense, into Matt's own categorizing gaze. It puts us in an uncomfortable position. We, like Matt, suspect our judgments about the campers are flawed, and yet we can't help but make them. If you're drawn to the paranoid tradition in fiction and film, you'll want to go on this unsettling journey. At its core, the novella scrutinizes our tendency to classify people into types. The only way Matt can remember individual campers and manage them as a collective is by reducing them to simplistic taglines like the show-off, the international student, the straggler, the pretty one. While it's tempting to dismiss Matt as a jerk, his keen self-awareness about this makes that really hard. He knows full well that turning a superficial trait into a full-on identity is reductive and unfair. But he sees these quick and dirty labels as a necessary evil, a practical hack that helps him anticipate how participants will interact so that he can head off potential problems. A good understanding of group dynamics is essential in his line of work, and he's convinced that an assumptive kind of shorthand is necessary to do the job well. Still, it's one thing to lean on these hollow identifiers when very little is at stake, and it's another thing entirely when they're used to support a decision with potentially deadly consequences. What I like about Matt is that he knows making decisions based on such surface calculations is, arbitrary at best, cruel at worst, he says. Yet, seeing no other option, he does it anyway. And so do we. Compelled by the plot's imperatives and Neugebauer's smart, formal choices, the reader is forced to participate in Matt's compressed logic, making hasty judgments that feel biased and feel wrong. Neugebauer wisely keeps the trip short. There isn't much time to unveil the alien, and this temporal constraint pushes both Matt and us toward wild interpretive leaps, with imagined worst-case scenarios rushing in to fill the gaps. And as the book hurtles towards its 92-page terminus, this hypervigilance only increases. Any word or phrase a character drops, no matter how innocuous, begins to sound like a damning clue, a smoking gun that could justify leaving them behind to die in the woods. This is why the novella is the perfect format for the story. Its brevity drives a kind of ruthlessness that prevents more deliberative modes of decision-making from taking over. Anything longer, and there might have been time for reason to creep in. Neugebauer's choice to tell the story from the relatively rare first-person present is just as crucial to the book's effect. If Matt were recounting the story from a position in the future, looking back on events that had already been resolved, readers would have access to the wisdom of hindsight, information that would help them evaluate his actions. But her deployment of the present tense means that his perspective is limited to a fine point in the present moment. With no access to a post-trip moment, no hint of how things will turn out, we can only think alongside Matt, sizing up people and situations based on painfully limited information. The immediacy of the narrative voice coerces us into a mode of discernment It isn't discernment at all, but a deeply flawed way of assessing human beings that, in less urgent situations, would likely be rejected. Present tense narration also ties into the book's obsession with memory. If the extra can implant false recollections of a fake camper, then Matt wants to know, how do I even know that I have any real memories at all, that they aren't all invented? The answer, of course, is that he can't know, and that's what's so terrifying about this strand of the story. What's most striking is how his voice, the voice of his internal monologue, which is stubbornly tied to the present moment, models the very malleability of memory that he fears. Neugebauer withholds information about Matt's past, offering a suspiciously truncated version of his history. We learn that he's married, but his wife isn't given a name, and he says that he tries his best not to think about her when he's away. All we know for sure is that he has been on this exact trip over 10 times, a detail he repeats as though caught in a loop. It's a little robotic, perhaps even alien. We never know for sure, and that uncertainty is precisely the point. I love it when a book's style and structure enact its ideas, and that's where the extra really shines. If the novella falters anywhere, it's in how explicitly and discursively it states those ideas. Matt repeatedly lays bare his anxieties about the fragility of memory. He articulates, sometimes at length, his understanding of group dynamics and the assumptions that govern inclusion and exclusion. His thinking on these subjects is always direct, always at the level of text rather than subtext, and I sometimes wished there was more room for inference. Some online reviewers say the extra's conclusion is weak because there's no clear resolution. I suspect that any loose threads will be picked up in forthcoming stories. This novella is the first in a planned trio set in a shared universe, but I also don't think the climax is that ambiguous, wink wink. Even if I'm completely wrong about the identity of the alien, though, it doesn't in any way detract from the book's ending. The climax has a countdown structure that ratchets up the tension to near unbearable pitch. It's far more satisfying than any sense of closure could be. Like the best paranoid fiction and film, the extra shows us that human beings, not aliens, may be the real horror. It's especially good at making us sit with the mercenary nature of human psychology, prompting us to consider how and why we act on the thinnest of assumptions. Horror fans who love The Thing and Invasion of the Body Snatchers will find a very thoughtful continuation of that tradition in the extra. If you like today's episode, please subscribe to the channel and visit our website, tracysterrors.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We will see you next time. Take care.